Encouraging, empowering, inspiring each other on this journey of faith. United in purpose, sisters in love we are. Women World Leaders.
Welcome to Women World Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Harwick. Thank you for joining me today as we celebrate God's grace in our lives, in this ministry, and around the world. My husband and I took a personality assessment years ago and came out with some really interesting results. It ultimately classified us according to 4 behavioral styles: dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. They used a graph to plot our results, and we both scored off the chart in opposite directions. His was a giant check mark, while mine was an inverted check mark. Where he scored high, I scored low. Where I scored high, he scored low. You know how they say opposites attract? We are the poster children for that saying. Those results didn't really surprise us all that much because although we share common faith, values, and interests, we couldn't be more different in nearly every other way. He's extremely detail-oriented, methodical, and logical. I like to fly by the seat of my pants and just jump into whatever I'm doing and deal with problems if and when they arise. He anticipates problems and has a plan to solve or avoid them. I anticipate smooth sailing, and when problems arise, guess who I look to for solutions? It has worked for us for about 40 years. We are both convinced that God brought us together to provide much-needed balance in each other's lives. According to that chart, we both go to extremes in some ways, so having to find middle ground and compromise keeps us out of trouble. Balance is a really important commodity in this world. We need a balanced budget, a balanced diet, and a balance between work and personal life. A balanced approach makes every decision or plan we incorporate more likely to be successful. As I've been focusing on a Christ-like approach to body image, I'm seeing that it's another area where balance is required. What I've been doing in this area, making an idol of my ideal body image and buying into the lies of diet culture, is an extreme that doesn't please God or serve me well. But if I were to swing in the opposite direction to an extreme, I might spend the rest of my life in pajamas, stop showering, and develop a host of health-related problems. And it could have a very negative impact on my social life, too. So, how do we find that balance? Balancing a budget is pretty straightforward because numbers are numbers. If you're at all familiar with diet culture, you know a balanced diet boils down to having the necessary nutrients without exceeding the recommended caloric values. Diet culture has taught us to follow hard and fast rules, like don't take in more calories than you can burn. We're used to following a specific eating plan that tells us exactly what to eat, how much, and when. It doesn't require a lot of thought and self-introspection, just knowledge and willpower. If only transitioning to a godly approach to body image was equally black and white. But God's not in the business of providing us with checklists and detailed step-by-step instructions. He gave very specific instructions in the laws that he gave to ancient Israel, and his people struggled to follow them. It wasn't long at all before they began to obsess over every rule and began to add some of their own in an effort to feel even more righteous. God confronted them about it in Isaiah 29:13, saying, "These people come near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship of me is based on merely human rules that they have been taught." There were 613 specific laws given to Moses, but to essentially build a fence around those laws to prevent accidental violations, Jewish leaders added an additional 1,500 rules. God simply said, "Keep the Sabbath holy by setting it aside for rest." The Pharisees created 39 additional laws around God's Sabbath law, including no spitting on the Sabbath, because you might disturb the dirt at your feet, and that could be considered plowing. Here's another. If a fly bothers you, you can't swat at it, because that could be regarded as hunting. If your house caught fire, you couldn't carry your clothing out of it, because that would be considered work. However, you could put on multiple layers of clothing and wear them out of the house without breaking any laws. The Pharisees were all about keeping the letter of the law, but they gave little thought to God's intent or seeking Him with their hearts, something that would actually please Him. Instead, they reveled in their own self-righteousness in keeping the law rather than recognizing their inherent sinfulness and seeking forgiveness. Jesus saw through their vain rule-keeping, saying in Mark 7:6, "Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites, as it is written, 'These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me.'" It's easy to sit in judgment of the Pharisees, but this process of transforming my approach to body image issues have revealed that I have a lot more in common with them than I ever realized. He chided them for focusing on how good the cup looked on the outside when the inside was filthy. That's not much different than my own obsession with looking a certain way on the outside, paying far less attention to the status of my heart. And I can relate to their desire to have a simple list of rules, however long, that I can attempt to keep and know exactly where I stand based on my performance. Seeking God's leading in everything that relates to my body image requires looking at some things I'd rather ignore, forging new ways of thinking, surrendering my ideal image to what He desires for me, and making difficult but lasting changes. Although this has to be a God-led process, there are some practical ways forward developed by those who are much further along on this journey. If we are to abandon diet culture's take on eating plans and exercise regimens, what are we supposed to do? Intuitive eating is a term used to describe an approach to diet that returns us to the way God created us to eat. He designed our bodies to send hunger signals when we need food and fullness signals when we've had enough. The basic principle is, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. It seems reasonable, but after years of dieting and deliberately ignoring those signals, it will take some time and practice to learn to recognize them again. I have no trouble knowing when my stomach is growling, but fullness is a little harder for me to recognize after years of stuffing myself with high-volume, low-calorie foods so that I'd be too full to eat what I shouldn't. On the plus side, I have discovered that now that no food is off limits or considered bad, I don't find myself having as many cravings. When I was trying to limit carbs, I found myself thinking about and longing for bread, chips, fries, and desserts. Just knowing that I can eat what I want minimizes my desire for it. And I've also discovered that Scripture is full of references to food and God's desire for us to enjoy it. Psalm 107 verse 9 tells us that God wants to satisfy our hunger and thirst with good things. Ecclesiastes 3 says that eating and drinking is a gift from God. 1 Timothy states that God richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. All this time, I've been rejecting the very pleasures He intended me to enjoy, as well as interfering with the way He designed my body to serve me. By restricting my calorie intake for so long, I lowered my metabolism to the point that if I exceeded the calorie allowance that should cause me to lose weight, I would actually gain. As I stopped counting macros and introduced more variety and less restriction into my diet, my metabolism increased enough to allow me to eat more normally. My experience falls right in line with what many studies have revealed. One study tracked contestants from TV's The Biggest Loser who lost impressive amounts of weight through one-on-one coaching from professionals. It showed that most regained 2/3 of what they had lost, and some actually became heavier than they were before the competition. In considering a different approach to food, I've discovered several other misconceptions that I and many others have incorrectly believed. As a believer, I took the biblical warnings regarding gluttony to be an indictment of anyone who overindulged in food. That interpretation was based on the prevailing thinking, which can actually be traced back to a 4th century Gnostic monk. Gnosticism was a false teaching common in the first several centuries. It led many to consider their bodies to be evil because anything material had a connection to the evil material world. In their minds, allowing their bodies more food than what was required to sustain life was sinful. But Jesus was never about limiting food. When he performed the miracle of the loaves and fishes, he ensured that everyone could eat all they wanted and that there would even be plenty of leftovers. He ate with his disciples, attending wedding feasts and religious festivals, occasions where food is abundant and meant to be enjoyed. So if God isn't concerned with the quantity of food we consume, what's the issue that's being addressed in his condemnation of gluttony? He has a problem when we put food in a role reserved for him. If we spend all our time and energy thinking about food, longing for it, or looking to the food itself or the restriction of it to bring us lasting fulfillment and peace, we've elevated it to a place meant only for him. Another misconception is that weight is a measure of health. While there is scientific evidence that excessive weight can put an unhealthy strain on joints and the cardiovascular system, we go too far in assuming that thinness equates to healthiness. If it were a simple equation of less weight equals better health, anorexia would be an ideal state, not a life-threatening condition. Guidelines regarding how much we should weigh often change and are not always very realistic. I long for the day when the body mass index is tossed aside because of its flawed premise. Using a simple weight-to-height ratio to determine someone's health is ridiculous, and yet what we pay for health care is often determined by it. My husband is 6'2" with a very large bone structure. Even when he was working out consistently with a 36-inch waist and in the best shape of his life, according to the BMI scale, he was morbidly obese. It just doesn't make sense, nor do the changing rules about good nutrition. The FDA regularly reevaluates and restructures the food pyramid to keep up with the latest changing thinking. Remember the 1980s when we all needed to eat a low-fat diet and make sure that we do lots of carb loading before a workout? Within a decade or two, carbs were evil and fat was good in the right forms. Should we follow the paleo diet, which is heavy on meat, or forego meat and every animal product and eat vegan? Every expert has a different approach with different reasoning, which will likely be disproven at some point in the future. God gave us our bodies just as He gave us everything we have. And just as we hope to be good stewards of the financial resources He provides, we should do our best to care for the physical resources He gave us as well. We should eat in such a way that we enjoy and appreciate the food He provides, without making it more important to us than He is. Similarly, we should move our bodies in ways we enjoy and learn to appreciate what they can do, rather than pushing them to or past their limits in an effort to sculpt them into some ideal shape. We should pay attention to their natural rhythms. When they're tired and aching, we should rest. When they're restless and energetic, we should move them, whether that means playing outside with the kids, going for a walk or run outdoors, playing a favorite sport, or hitting the gym. We need regular exercise and will benefit from it, but we should reject the no pain, no gain kind of thinking and embrace exercise as a gift God has generously given us. The kind of thinking we employ going forward will be the key to really grasping what God intends for our bodies. If you're like me, there is much wrong thinking to overcome, and it's been cemented through years of practice. Fortunately, God is in the business of transforming minds. In Romans 12, he warns us not to be conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. The word renew indicates that our minds were set one way, but now they need to be made new with new ways of thinking. Obviously, this passage encompasses how we think about everything, but how we think about our bodies, how we view them, how we use them and nurture them is definitely included. For a long time, my thoughts have been centered on transforming my body into something that conformed to the world's idea of what it should be. As God is revealing what He wants for me, I want my efforts to be centered on transforming my thinking. One of the most useful tools He has provided for that is found in Philippians 4:8. Paul is closing his letter to the Philippians by addressing a church controversy and detailing the kinds of behaviors that will lead to peace. Ultimately, that's what this body image journey is about, finding peace. As long-ingrained thoughts try to dissuade me from renewing my mind, I will dwell on what Paul instructs us to think on. Whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. The transformation I'm seeking in this instance is more of a metamorphosis. I've been a caterpillar, striving to be a butterfly, convinced that staying safely bound in the cocoon of diet culture's rules would bring me the change I longed for. But the only way to become the butterfly He intends me to be is to struggle against that cocoon of lies, to allow Him to mature me and break down the bonds of wrong thinking that restrain me, so that I can emerge free, completely different and truly beautiful, according to His standard of beauty, not mine. Thanks for listening to Women World Leaders Podcast. Join us each week as we explore together God's extravagant love and your courageous purpose. Visit our website at womenworldleaders.com to submit a prayer request, register for an upcoming event, and support the ministry. From His heart to yours, we are Women World Leaders. All content is copyrighted by Women World Leaders and cannot be used without written consent.